Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is Ramisa and you are watching Ramisa's lecture series. This is going to be our lecture series 3 part 2. In part 1 we discussed how Griffin entered into the theatrical company where he wore dark glasses, false nose and big bushy side whiskers, and then he attacked the shopkeeper from the behind and took off all the money from him. Okay, this was all done in part 1. In this session, we are starting from this point. Eager to get away from crowded London, he took a train to the village of Epping, where he booked 2 rooms at the local inn. Now, when he left the crowded London, he decided to go to the village of Epping, and there he booked 2 rooms for himself. Okay, it was a local inn and he just managed to give the rent of 2 rooms there in Epping. तो अब ये crowded London से भागता है और Epping विलेज जाता है, वहाँ पे 2 कमरे लेता है. The arrival of a stranger at an inn in winter was in any case an unusual event. A stranger of such uncommon appearance set all tongues wagging. Mrs. Hall, the landlord's wife, made every effort to be friendly. But Griffin had no desire to talk and told her, "My reason for coming to Epping is a desire for solitude. I don't wish to be disturbed in my work. Besides, an accident has affected my face." Now see, the arrival of this stranger in an inn, and particularly it was winter at that time. So when he just went there, all the people they felt it was an unusual event. Why? There were 2 reasons for it. First reason was that it was the midwinter there. Nobody would come at that time. तो पहला रीज़न था कि एक तो विंटर चल रहा था और इसका जो अपीयरेंस था, जो इसका लुक था, वो बिल्कुल ही ऑड था. Okay? When people saw him, they started talking about him. They started backbiting about him. Who is he? Where from he has come? Okay, and how he is appearing. Okay, so these were all the questions talked and discussed by the people. So the appearance or the arrival of the stranger was unusual. ये अजीब था कि वो वहाँ इन पे जाता है और वहाँ पे 2 रूम्स जो है बुक करता है. जो वहाँ मिसेस हॉल होती है, लैंडलॉर्ड्स वाइफ, she makes her presence before Griffin and starts talking with him. But as we know, Griffin was a very awkward, very strange man. So he directly said to her, "My reason for coming to Epping is a desire for solitude. I want to live alone. I don't want to be disturbed here. Okay, I've come here for solitude. Okay, to relax here. And besides, moreover, my face has been affected by an accident. तो मुझे एक एक्सीडेंट हुआ है, तो उसी की वजह से सारा कुछ जो ऊपर बैंडेज हैं और जो भी वो अनकॉमन अपीयरेंस थी उसके बारे में भी ये पहले ही उनको स्टेटमेंट देता है. Satisfied that her guest was an eccentric scientist. Now, Mrs. Hall, she realized that this is not a usual man. He's an eccentric scientist, an odd one, with a strange behavior. And in view of the fact that he had paid her in advance, Mrs. Hall was prepared to excuse his strange habits and irritable temper. But the stolen money didn't last long, and presently Griffin had to admit that he had no more ready cash. He pretended, however, that he was expecting a check to arrive at any moment. Now she realized that this scientist is not a common person. He's an eccentric man. Okay, he's particularly a scientist. And this was the bonus point that he has already paid his rent in advance. तो उसने एडवांस में मनी दिया था. तो अब मिसेस हॉल के लिए ऐसा कोई भी ऑप्शन नहीं था कि वो इसको डिस्टर्ब करती. ठीक है, तो और जो स्टोलन मनी इसके पास था वो तो इसने रेंट पे दे दिया, लेकिन अब वो स्टोलन मनी कब तक चलता. ठीक है, वो कब तक ऐसे ही रहता. तो आखिर तो उसको ख़त्म होना था पैसे को. ठीक है। तो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता से इसके पास जो पैसे होते हैं वो सारे ख़त्म होते हैं। अब जब रेंट की बात आती है तो ये ऐसे प्रिटेंड करता है इनके सामने कि जैसे एक चेक आ रही है इनको, एंड ही इज़ वेटिंग फॉर द चेक। ये प्रिटेंड कर रहा है, ओके, एंड ही इज़ जस्ट मेकिंग और गिविंग द एक्सप्रेशन दैट ही इज़ वेटिंग फॉर अ चेक टू अराइव एट एनी मोमेंट। ठीक है, ऐसा हो रहा है। लेकिन एक्चुअली उसके पास ना तो पैसा था ना तो चेक आने वाली थी। ठीक है, वो असल में किसका वेट कर रहा था, आई विल जस्ट डिस्कस दिस लेटर ऑन। शॉर्टली आफ्टरवर्ड्स a curious episode occurred. Very early in the morning, a clergyman and his wife were awakened by noises in the study. Creeping downstairs, they heard the chink of money being taken away from the clergyman's desk. Now इसके बाद थोड़ा ही टाइम हुआ था कि एक अजीब सा वाक़या हो गया। क्लर्जीमैन, हु इज़ अ क्लर्जीमैन? क्लर्जीमैन इज़ अ प्रीस्ट, ओके। तो उसके साथ एक अजीब सा वाक़या हो गया। अर्ली इन द मॉर्निंग ही एंड हिज वाइफ दे वर अवेकन्ड बाय द नॉइजेस, बाय द चिंक ऑफ मनी। कोई बंदा उनके स्टडी रूम में गया था और वो पैसे वहाँ से निकाल रहा था, एंड दे हर्ड दिस नॉइज। नाउ व्हेन दे वर अपस्टेयर्स दे केम डाउन, ओके, एंड the style of coming down from the stairs was creeping downstairs. They were coming slowly, okay, creeping down. Creeping is a symbolic language which means coming down slowly or going slowly, okay, just like a creeper. And they heard the chink of money being taken away from the clergyman's desk. तो कोई बंदा वहाँ से पैसा ले रहा था. Without making any noise and with a poker grasped firmly in his hand, the clergyman flung open the door. Surrender! तो कोई शोर किए बगैर उसने एक स्टिक हाथ में ली और now he is alert, and when he opened the door very quickly he just cried, surrender. Okay, he didn't see anyone there, he just cried, surrender. Then, to his amazement, he realized that the room appeared to be empty. He and his wife looked under the desk and behind the curtains and even up the chimney. There wasn't a sign of anybody, yet the desk had been opened and the housekeeping money was missing. Okay, now they got surprised when they saw that money has been taken from the desk, but there was none. They saw nobody there. Okay, and this was something unusual. That your money has been taken away and there is no one, okay, who has committed the theft. Extraordinary affair, the clergyman kept saying for the rest of the day. तो अगले दिन ये पूरा जो इसका दिन था वो यही सोच रहा था कि एक अजीब सा हमारे साथ एक अफेयर हो गया. This was extraordinary. When something unusual happens, this is extraordinary. Ordinary is something usual, something common, but when something uncommon happens, that is extraordinary. But it was not as extraordinary as the behavior of Mrs. Hall's furniture a little later that morning. But this was somehow understood. But the thing which happened with Mrs. Hall's furniture was very much interesting and very much curious. The landlord and his wife were up very early and were surprised to see the scientist's door wide open. Usually it was shut and locked, and he was furious if anyone entered his room. The opportunity seemed too good to be missed. They peeped around the door, saw nobody, and decided to investigate. The bedclothes were cold, showing that the scientist must have been up for some time. And stranger still, the clothes and the bandages and that he always wore were lying about the room. Now, one day what happened, very, very early in the morning, the landlord and his wife, they got shocked when they saw the scientist's door open. Okay, usually it was shut. वो कभी भी अपना दरवाज़ा खुला नहीं रखता था. And whenever anyone enters in his room, he would become furious. उसको गुस्सा आता था कि तुम मेरे कमरे में क्यों आ गए. ठीक है, अभी जो लैंड और उसकी वाइफ थी, इनको ये अपॉर्चुनिटी मिली और ये चाहते थे कि हम अभी देखें, इन्वेस्टिगेट करें कि इसके रूम में है क्या. Now when they peeped around the door, they saw nobody there and they entered the room. वो कमरे में आते हैं और वहाँ पे बेड क्लोथ्स चेक करते हैं, इन्वेस्टिगेशन स्टार्ट करते हैं, एंड दे सी द बेड क्लोथ्स वर कोल्ड. दैट मीन्स कि साइंटिस्ट को बहुत टाइम हुआ है उठे हुए. और इससे भी ज़्यादा स्ट्रेंज क्या था, वहाँ पे जो क्लोथ्स थे, उसके बैंडेजेस विच ही वोर अराउंड हिज हेड, वो वहाँ पे रूम में था, पड़ा हुआ था। तो अब अगर ये साइंटिस्ट है तो अभी लोगों ने तो उसको सिर्फ बैंडेज में देखा हुआ है, उसके बगैर तो कभी देखा ही नहीं है। अब दिस वॉज समथिंग विच वॉज अनयूजुअल, ठीक है। नाउ दे स्टार्टेड थिंकिंग अबाउट दिस ग्रिफन कि ये कौन है, ये कैसे आज बैंडेज यहाँ पे गिरा हुआ है, ठीक है। All of a sudden, Mrs. Hall heard a sniff close to her ear. A moment later, the hat on the bedpost leapt up and dashed itself into her face. Then the bedroom chair became alive. Springing into the air, it charged straight at her, legs foremost. As she and her husband turned away in terror, the extraordinary chair pushed them both out of the room and then appeared to slam and lock the door after them. Now, when they were investigating his room, suddenly Mrs. Hall, she hears the sniff close to her ear. तो कान में कुछ हवा उसको लगती है, कोई इसको फूंक मारता है, तो अचानक से वहाँ पे जो बेड पे एक हैट होती हैं वो अचानक से उड़ जाती हैं और मिसेस हॉल के चेहरे पे आ जाती हैं, ठीक है। उसके बाद जो बेडरूम की चेयर होती हैं, शी बिकम्स अलाइव, ओके। तो जैसे हॉरर सीन चल रहा है तो अचानक से वो जो चेयर है वो हिलने लगती हैं और फिर उसके बाद ये हवा में आ जाती हैं चेयर और इनके लेग्स पे आ जाती हैं, ठीक है। तो ये और उसका हस्बैंड दे बिकेम वेरी हॉरिफाइड, वो बहुत ज़्यादा डर गए और उस चेयर ने उन दोनों को कमरे से बाहर निकाला, ओके। उसके बाद कमरे को लॉक हो गया। मिसेस हॉल ऑलमोस्ट फेल डाउन द स्टेयर्स इन हिस्टेरिक्स। नाउ can you imagine or can you tell me what is hysterics? This is the word, hysterics. Hysteric means when you are not able to control your emotions. Okay? When something goes uncontrollable, that's hysterics. Okay? Madness. Okay? Uncontrollable emotions. So, when Mrs. Hall was thinking about it, she became furious, she became hysteric. वो इस इवेंट के बारे में सोच रही है कि ये हमारे साथ क्या हुआ। Mrs. Hall almost fell down the stairs in hysterics. She was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits and that the stranger had somehow caused these to enter into her furniture. अब ये जो मिसेस हॉल थी, शी बिगिन्स टू थिंक अबाउट दिस स्ट्रेंज मैन कि ये क्या हुआ मेरे चेयर्स के साथ, फर्नीचर के साथ क्या हुआ है, आज तक तो ऐसा कभी नहीं हुआ है, तो मुझे लगता है कुछ हॉन्ट हुआ है, किसी ने जादू किया है इस पे। My poor mother used to sit in that chair, she moaned, to think it should rise up against me now. मेरी मामा इस पे बैठती थी and I never have thought about it कि ये मेरे ही खिलाफ उठेगी, आज उसने आज मुझे ही कमरे से बाहर निकाला, ठीक है। The feeling among the neighbors was that the trouble was caused by witchcraft. But witchcraft or not, when news of the burglary at the clergyman's home became known, the strange scientist was strongly suspected of having had a hand in it. Suspicion grew even stronger when he suddenly produced some ready cash, though he had admitted not long before that he had no money. Now, ये जो वहाँ पे नेबर्स थे उनको लगा था कि जादू कुछ हुआ है इनके साथ, बट व्हेन दे हर्ड द बर्गलरी इंसिडेंट इन क्लर्जीमैन्स होम, all the people and all the persons in neighborhood, they start thinking and suspecting about this gentleman, about scientist. Maybe he has committed the theft. अब इनका सस्पिशन और ज़्यादा बढ़ जाता है जब वो उनके सामने पैसे रखता है। वो अभी तक तो कहता था आई एम वेटिंग फॉर द चेक टू अराइव, अब कहाँ से अचानक से उसने पैसे निकाले, ठीक है। अब उनका जो शक था ना वो यकीन में चेंज होता है, ठीक है। उसके बाद लोगों को तो पता था कि इसके पास पैसे ही नहीं है, बट व्हेन ही सडनली प्रोड्यूस द मनी, सो ऑल पीपल देयर दे स्टार्टेड टू सस्पेक्ट हिम, ठीक है। इसी ने चोरी भी की है, इसी ने फर्नीचर के साथ भी ऐसा ही किया है, तो सारे लोग वहाँ पे इसके बारे में सोचते हैं। द विलेज कॉन्स्टेबल वॉज सेक्रेटली सेंट फॉर। इंस्टेड ऑफ वेटिंग फॉर द कॉन्स्टेबल, मिसेस हॉल वेंट टू द साइंटिस्ट हु हैड समहाउ मिस्टीरियसली अपीयर्ड फ्रॉम द एम्प्टी बेडरूम। नाउ they called the constable, but instead of waiting for the constable, Mrs. Hall tries to go to the room of scientist and talk to him कि ये क्या हुआ, मेरे फर्नीचर के साथ तुमने क्या किया है, ठीक है, वो जाती हैं उसके कमरे में. I want to know what you have been doing to my chair upstairs, she demanded, and I want to know how it is you came out of an empty room and how you entered a locked room. Now she is just questioning him कि मुझे बताओ मेरे चेयर्स के साथ तुमने क्या किया है, ठीक है, और मुझे बताओ एम्प्टी रूम अगर था तो तुम कहाँ से आ गए, ठीक है, अगर ये बंद था, लॉक्ड था, तो आप कहाँ से आ गए इधर. अब क्या होता है, the scientist was always quick-tempered, and now he became furious. You don't understand who or what I am, he shouted. Very well, I will show you. Now, as we read that he was quick-tempered, इसको जल्दी गुस्सा आता था. तो जब मिसेस हॉल इसको कहती हैं कि तुम कहाँ से एम्प्टी रूम से आ गए, if it was locked, okay, then how do you appear in the empty room? अब उसको गुस्सा आता है, इसको कहता है, now I'll make you understand who I am. Okay, you don't know me, let me show you. Suddenly he threw off bandages, whiskers, spectacles, and even nose. It took him only a minute to do this. The horrified people in the bar found themselves staring at a headless man. अब जब उसको गुस्सा आया, what he does? The power which I talked about. The power he was having was only that he would throw off his clothes, he would remove off his clothes. Okay? And this way he becomes powerful. By making himself invisible. Why he wanted to become invisible is a question to us. वो क्यों invisible बनना चाहता था, ठीक है, उसका एम क्या था invisible बनने का. तो ये जो क्लियर कट इवेंट्स हमारे सामने आ रहे हैं, how he treated people, how he set fire to the landlord, okay, and how he robbed the money from the people, how he entered illegally in the shop. So these all incidents, they tell us what kind of a person he was and why he wanted to become invisible. So in the end he throws whiskers, spectacles, even nose. एक मिनट भी नहीं लगता उसको सारे कपड़े निकालने में. और when he is taking off his clothes, all the people, they are watching him, they are gazing him. और वो ज़्यादा डर जाते हैं क्योंकि वो एक ऐसे बंदे को देख रहे हैं जिसका सर ही नहीं है. तो जैसे जैसे उसको अपने हेड से वो निकालता है बैंडेज, तो सारे लोग उसको घूर रहे हैं और दे आर बिकमिंग वेरी फ्यूरियस, दे आर बिकमिंग वेरी हॉरिफाइड. Mr. Jaffers, the constable, now arrived and was quite surprised to find that he had to arrest a man without a head. Here we need to remember Mr. Jaffers is a character in this story. Okay, Mr. Jaffers was a constable, and what kind of a constable he was, okay, let's deal with it, and was quite surprised to find that he had to arrest a man without a head. But Jaffers was not easily prevented from doing his duty. If a magistrate's warrant ordered a person's arrest, then that person had to be arrested with or without his head. Mr. Jaffers was a very kind, he was a very honest and dedicated officer. Okay? If magistrate's warrant orders somebody to be arrested, then he would do that job without any hesitation, whether the man is with head or without the head. मिस्टर जाफर्स जो था वो बहुत ज़्यादा ऑनेस्ट था, डेडिकेटेड था. उसको जब भी कोई वारंट मिल जाता था किसी के खिलाफ, वो नहीं देखता था फिर हेड के साथ हैं, हेड के बगैर हैं, तो वो अपना जॉब जो है वो अच्छे से वो परफॉर्म करता था वो टास्क, ठीक है. There followed a remarkable scene as the policeman tried to get hold of a man who was becoming more and more invisible. As he threw off one garment after another, finally a shirt flew into the air and the constable found himself struggling with someone he couldn't see at all. अब क्या होता है, एक remarkable scene हो जाता है, ठीक है. जैसे जैसे policeman Mr. Jaffers, as he was trying to get hold of the scientist was making himself invisible gradually and slowly. After throwing one garment, another garment, तो वो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता से इनविजिबल कर रहा था अपने आप को. तो फाइनली ए शर्ट फ्लेव इनटू द एयर. तो एक शर्ट हवा में जाती है, तो जैसे ही शर्ट हवा में जाती हैं, मिस्टर साइंटिस्ट ग्रिफिन बिकम्स ऑल इनविजिबल. नाउ नोबडी कैन सी हिम. ओके, सो नाउ मिस्टर जाफर्स बिकम्स कंफ्यूज्ड कि मुझे अगर पकड़ना है तो पकड़ना किसे है. Some people tried to help him but found themselves hit by blows that seemed to come from nowhere. तो कोई लोग आते थे उसकी हेल्प करने, बट उनको वो मुक्के मारता था वहाँ से. ओके, वहाँ से उनको अटैक करता था. अब लोग तो नहीं देखते थे ना कहाँ से मुझे अटैक हो रहा है, कहाँ से मुझे मुक्के आ रहे हैं. In the end, Jaffers was knocked unconscious and he made a last attempt to hold on to the unseen scientist. So Jaffers, although he was dedicated, he tried so hard to get hold of him. But this scientist, he was blowing him. Okay? And after a very hard knock, he made this Jaffers unconscious. वो बेहोश पड़ा वहाँ पे, मुक्का मार के वो बेहोश हो गया. There were nervous, excited cries of hold him, but this was easier said than done. Griffin had shaken himself free and no one knew where to lay hands on him. तो वहाँ पे जो nervous cries थी, excited cries थी, पकड़ो पकड़ो, लेकिन ये बोलना आसान था, करना बिल्कुल मुश्किल था. Why? Because उनको ऐसी पावर होना चाहिए, उनको ऐसी ताकत होनी चाहिए कि वो एक ऐसे बंदे को पकड़े जिसको हम देखते भी नहीं हैं, ठीक है, जो पॉसिबल नहीं है जिसको हम पकड़ सके. सो व्हाट वी कैन डू इज समथिंग विच इज रिलेटेड टू द सीन विच कैन बी ऑब्जर्व्ड. हम उस पर ताकत चला सकते हैं. व्हाट इज ट्रांसेंडेंटल, व्हाट कैन नॉट बी सीन इज नॉट इन आवर कंट्रोल. ओके, सो दिस वॉज द स्टोरी ऑफ H.G. Wells about a scientist. Now see, the scientist made a drug. एक साइंटिस्ट होता है जिसका नाम ग्रिफिन होता है, वो एक ड्रग बहुत ज़्यादा कोशिश करता है एक ड्रग बनाने की, ताकि ही वुड मेक अ ह्यूमन इनविजिबल. ठीक है. नाउ ही गेट्स सक्सेस इन इट. ये एक ड्रग बनाता है, ही swallows it and he becomes invisible. Now as I told you, what was the aim of becoming invisible? वो क्यों इनविजिबल बनना चाहता था? क्या इसमें कोई अच्छा रीज़न था उसको? क्या उसको कोई अच्छा एम था? ओके, तो लेसन से हमें बहुत सारी एग्जांपल्स मिलती हैं कि उसका जो एम था वो बिल्कुल भी अच्छा एम नहीं था. क्यों? क्योंकि उसने लोगों को मारा, उसने रॉबरी की, उसने आग लगाई घर को, और उसने पैसे चोरी लिए, उसने मारा लोगों को. ठीक है. ये सारी जो चीज़ें हैं, ये सारे इंसिडेंट्स जो हैं, दे इलैबोरेट अस, दे एक्सप्लेन अस दैट द ओनली एम ऑफ मेकिंग हिमसेल्फ इनविजिबल was that he wanted to do those activities through which he can make himself free from bondages, free from all the rules of society, free from politics and country. ओके, तो पुलिस से वो बचना चाहता था, वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन से बचना चाहता था, वो लोगों के सोशल नॉर्म से बचना चाहता था. बट he only wanted to be free so that he can do whatever he wants. ओके, तो ये जो भी करना चाहता था, ये फ्रीली तरीके से करना चाहता था, ताकि इसको कोई और ओवर पावर ना कर सके. सो अब यहाँ पे देखें हम, वी कैन एनालाइज कि अगर उसने ये मेडिसिन बनाया था, तो ऐसा भी हो सकता था कि वो इस मेडिसिन को यूज़ करता फॉर द बेटरमेंट ऑफ द पीपल. ओके, इन ऑर्डर टू रेज द सोशल नॉर्म्स, इन ऑर्डर टू हेल्प पुअर पीपल. ऐसा भी हो सकता था, बट ही डिडंट डू दैट. Okay, he didn't care about the people. He would have helped them, but instead of helping them, he hurt them, he attacked them, he made theft. Okay, so this, as we discussed, Griffin as a human being and Griffin as a scientist. He was genius. He was having all the intelligence related to the science. But when we analyze him, when we go beyond this scientific theories, we found him less human, a subhuman. Okay, not so loving and caring for the humanity. Okay, so there are now some of the issues related to this lesson. Griffin was rather a lawless person. You have to comment on it. Okay, if he was a lawless person, you have to give evidences from the lesson. If अगर वो lawless person है, कैसे है? Okay, you have to comment on it. How would you assess Griffin as a scientist? Now see, as a lawless person, you have to define him as a human being. Okay, now if you wanted to define him as a scientist, okay, define him on the basis of the proof which you get from the lesson. Would you like to become invisible? This is a question for us. If we want to become invisible, what will we do? Okay, will we just use that particular quality or becoming invisible for the betterment of people? What advantages and disadvantages do you foresee if you did? तो क्या advantages हैं, क्या disadvantages हैं, आप क्या चीज़ें देखते हो? अगर आप invisible बनेंगे तो आप क्या करेंगे? As there are forces around forces around us that are invisible? For example, magnetism. Are there aspects of matter that are invisible or not visible to the naked eye? What would the world be like if you could see such forces or such aspects of matter? So say for example, if we see all the transcendental beings जो normally हम नहीं देख पाते हैं, what if we started to see those things? Say for example, all the matters, all the these organisms in the air, okay, if we started to see them, okay, for example, the force of gravity, the force of magnetism, okay, and theory of relativity, ये सारी चीज़ें अगर हम अपनी आंखों से देखते हैं तो आपको क्या लगता है कैसा हमारी जो दुनिया है वो कैसे दिखती? What makes glass or water transparent? What is the scientific explanation for this? This question has been asked on the realistic ground. Okay, whether you have to say whether the making yourself invisible or transparent, is this really possible in this world or not? If this is possible, how? Okay, or will there be any such time when science and technology will develop into something which may be possible for the future generation, that they can become or they can make themselves invisible? But till now it's not possible for a man to become all transparent, and no man can see him. It's not possible till now. So I hope आपको ये जो हमारा सेशन है वो आपको समझ आया होगा. तो if you have any confusions and queries, you can just mention in the comment box, and all your queries and confusions will be appreciated. Thank you so much for this session. Have a good day.